All right, boys and girls, here we are. Uh, here we are. Okay, so obviously, if you clicked on this link, you know what's about to happen. What's about to happen is some major ass spoilers for The Last of Us 2. This is part one of the Gamer Mind Presents SpoilerCast, The Last of Us 2, with me, myself, Josh, and Manny here.
What's going on, guys?
We are about to get down and dirty. Obviously, we're not going to bring the same amount of gusto and fantastical nature as our normal podcast or normal shows where we have guests and we're just kind of wilding out here. We're just kind of like going to do a deep dive. This is kind of the first. I mean, we've done stuff like reviews in the past, but this is kind of like the first we actually sit down and really dig into what is actually going on in The Last of Us 2. I'm about 18 hours in. Manny's about 14 hours in. We're kind of like in the same. It's unfortunate because like Manny is so close to the next kind of like hurdle in the game, but we'll stick out of that. We're going to start from the beginning and work our way towards right before you get the story transition. I would say what I think is the halfway point where we actually meet and play as another character in the story. So, without further ado, we're just gonna jump right into it. So, if you don't know, if you lived under a rock for the past couple years, because I feel like it's taken almost a decade for this game to come out, The Last of Us 2 is a continuation of The Last of Us 1. We're going to go into this assuming that the listener or the person that's watching this has played the first one and has done like the comics and the DLC, which, if I'm not mistaken, is Left Behind.
Yes,
Left Behind. Okay.
yes, left behind.
So, quick recap. Ellie and Joel are in this nice ass little town called Jackson. The game opens up where everybody's having a good time. It's the apocalypse is post apocalyptic apocalypto. That was a movie, Mel Gibson. Yeah. So apocalypse. They settled into a town. They've got power running. That I mean, at first glance, Manny, it when I got into Jackson and I'm sitting there throwing the snowballs at the kids and having a good old time right before I go out and start the proper journey. I kind of got a feeling like everything was okay, like everything was fine. They've got
Oh
Christmas
yeah.
tree lights up, and what I mean, what did you?
You would
I felt
believe.
like I felt like I was in some small Colorado town right outside the Rocky Mountains, just kind of doing my thing. Like, what was your take on that?
Yeah, I really like how the game opened, and especially because the way that I played this game was I forced myself to get through the first one, and right on the day that The Last of Us 2 came out, I just finished The Last of Us 1 and immediately started The Last of Us 2, and the transition from the first game to the second game is seamless. They even play certain sections of the first game, like replay them, just to kind of show where you were. And
Last
I
time
love
on The
that
Last
when
of
you
Us.
yeah, but very subtle and very well done. I love how they did it in the new engine and the new graphics, and when you transition into this this world where Joel and Ellie are like Joel is walking in on Ellie and talking to her. I liked how very little in common they had other than the all the suffering that they had from the first game. You saw how it was tough for Joel to talk to Ellie and kind of relate. The only really real thing that they had to that would kind of like bring them together is like all the shit they went through in the first game. So I love that first scene, and you see like this super developed town, because the first time you went there in the first game you didn't really see a lot. You just saw a section of it, like getting into the town and whatnot. So, fast forward, the game brings you to that one scene where you're like seeing the entire town, and that was super amazing.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
like I get like,
I
so the thing you said about Joel and Ellie's kind of like dynamic, I feel like, it's been so long since I played the first game. So a lot of that stuff kind of I had to like relearn, like kind of when you get back on the bike, you're like, oh, I haven't done this in a while, I have to relearn. But, uh, and we'll get to it later on, but I feel like Ellie's character is much more of like an advanced rebel teen where it's like she doesn't care what anybody's doing. She doesn't really care what people think about her. She's very kind of standoffish. Even with her friends, I feel like in the early starts of the game, she's very short. She's very short with her responses. Obviously, there was
Hmm.
that kissing scene that we saw from the early trailers. E3s. If you hadn't seen it, go ahead and watch it. She kind of kisses her some kind of girlfriend. I think you want to say,
Yeah.
with but it's basically like a real life drama in a post apocalyptic setting, which when you first get into Jackson and you're walking around and you're talking to the other people, you seem very well liked. You seem like a person that can get shit done. And I don't know if that was that was a fight won through attrition. They heard about all the shit that you went through post Jackson, but I think that Ellie has solidified herself as a valuable member of the Jackson team, and not the team that shovels the dirt or runs the bar. She's the one that goes out with the search parties and clears out the undead. Um, so I think that persona is something that kind of struck me as do I like Ellie? Do I am I on her side? And I'm trying to think about what I would do in that situation. Oftentimes when I'm watching a movie or when I'm reading a book or I'm playing a game, I put myself in the shoes of the protagonist and I'm like, well, how would I act? And I get it. She's a person that's seen a lot of shit. She's a person that's been through a lot of shit. All these people around her know, and she's just like, hey, whatever, man, we're gonna go on this fucking horse and we're gonna trot down to this section. We're gonna clear out the undead. I find it so it's this game reminds me of like a Pixar movie where there's so much attention to detail, especially in the early parts of the game, and they don't highlight these aspects. You kind of have to like pick up on them, and you already gotta have
I
like a mature mind as to what the world would look like if it was this. And we're talking about signing in and signing out horses, signing in to patrols, leaving little notes for your people that are gonna come follow you about what happened. That's like some prison guard shit that you keep a log of what's going on because shit's real.
Yeah, yeah, I love that the game puts all these little details for you to take your time and read if you want to. Even the note taking that she has, which was obviously something that was taken from Uncharted 4, but it's nice. It's a nice touch to show like her taking notes of certain events and then letting the player decide when to go back to kind of deep dive into what Ellie is thinking. What was her takeaway from certain conversations, from certain interactions. You can always just go back into the notebook and actually see these things for yourself, and I love that. I love that part of how the story allows you to kind of deep dive a little bit more into these characters because even though the story in the first game was relatively good, it didn't really give you that much background on the players. It just kind of threw them out there. Like the only player you really had any insight as to what their background was Joel. And then Left Behind kind of added a little bit more to Ellie's story and a little bit more to her personality. And then this game really deep dives into each of the characters and even like how the game fast forwards so many years. I'm glad that the game in terms of storytelling is filling the gaps of what happened between where you are now and what happened then. And I really enjoy that the all those little snippets that they give you for you to kind of read and not just for the players but even like the world that you live in. Like they like each, I don't know if you definitely have seen it, but as you're exploring a town, you'll find like that person that, hey, and this did happen in the first game, not often, but it did. Like you'll find a note from somebody, and then you'll continue finding notes, and you're kind of following their story of what happened in that town. I love that. I love that the game puts that in there, and it kind of gives you motivation to go explore these areas a little more.
Yeah, because that's I would guess like you were talking about um, these developers have a pedigree in environmental storytelling. So, it's very much one of the situations where on your dying breath, locked up in a library somewhere where there's no way in, there's no way out, to put your last rights down on paper, whether they're your last rights or not. Some of them do. Some of them are very self-aware, and some of them are very hopeful. Hey, we're gonna get through this. Don't worry about it. I'm gonna meet up with you. And
Hmm.
it's just like and you're right. It gives you the motivation to see, hey, despite what uh, the other characters around you want you to do. Oftentimes, I feel like I'm, trying to just scour through every nook and cranny just to see what the developers have painstakingly put into these little corners and these little nooks. Obviously, the game itself wants you to go right, but the developers kind of say, "Hey, why don't you check over there?" I'm glad that it's not like hand holding. You want it if it's
Yeah.
there, you got it. If you don't want it, if you want to breeze through the game, you have that option too. I think they're a little bit pushy when it comes to like, hey, do you want a hint? Like that's the only like my only beef with the game so far is the kind of pacing where it's like you just got out of a fight, you're beat to all hell, you're scouring for upgrades, mods. We'll get to the gameplay in a little bit. You're scouring for upgrade mods for your weapons, just notes and little trinkets and ammo. But
Hmm.
oftentimes I feel like when I'm in the process of just looking at everything, and maybe that's just a fault of my own, but I feel like more often than not I'm getting prompted to, hey, here's a hint, or hey, Dina is yelling at me to come this way. I'm like, yeah, I get it, but bro, I'm looking at all the stuff that you guys did. Like, if they were just to bump down the frequency of those things, just like I would say, like, give me a fucking minute, give me a minute to look at your beautiful world, and then I'll move on. But yeah, so
I tell you, I think the game doesn't really make it very apparent about the amount of options that you have in the game options with accessibility and hints and whatnot.
oh,
One of the
there
things
is
I
a
did.
ton, and I probably at my
Oh
fault
yeah.
for not looking at all that stuff.
Well, it doesn't tell you. Like so I got really annoyed doing that at the very beginning of the game where you're walking through the town and you're seeing the people and you're kind of I'm already looking for collectibles because that's what I do. And the game immediately is prompting you and you can go into the options and you can certainly turn this off and I did because it was very annoying because I mean you spend maybe 1 minute exploring and then the character that's with you it's like hey let's go this way and I don't want to know that. I don't want to know that because I want to naturally explore the environment. Now I'll say this: the graphics are so good that actually finding what you can pick up and what you can't pick up
It's
is sometimes
hard.
a little hard.
Yeah, it is. There's so many times where I've been through a building like two or three times, and then like on the third time, I see like, hey, here's four crafting material that you've walked by the three times. Like it just pops up. Like everything just kind of it looks so real. It's like this is the closest you can get. I mean, Red Dead was fine, but this is it's photorealistic in a way that like in Red Dead everything was made to look brand new. Like they just built the
Mhm.
brothel, they just built the town and the bars. Everything was kind of like for lack of a better term, uh, nice. This is meant to look dilapidated and people,
Mhm.
just like the earth taking its place back with the overgrowth of the weeds and the grass. So there are times, but it kind of works both ways, right? So for me, I've definitely been in those situations like, yo, where the fuck do I go? I gotta figure this out. I can't be this dumb. This isn't some fucking
Mhm.
puzzle game that I gotta figure out. And it's like when I figure it out on my own, uh, I feel like a genius. I feel like a fucking genius.
Yeah.
Like if I was in that situation, it's like, oh yeah, of course, get on top of the fucking truck, jump on top of it, shimmy on the roof, jump off.
You're talking exact like are you talking about that section before you go into the wolf
Oh
that
God,
wall that thick wall
yes,
remember that like and you're
yes.
trying to find like how the fuck do I get up
And
there.
it's so tempting to like hit the R3 button because that's like it's basically a for me, I see that as a cheat. Like, oh, I couldn't figure it out. I gotta, okay, developers, you win. What's the secret?
Hmm.
But even those situations where it's like, when you put me in a situation where it's a part of my survival, I always feel like, and I know that there are different visual cues, audio cues, especially from whoever if in fact you have a partner at the time. Sometimes you don't, and sometimes Ellie talks to herself. Whereas that they'll talk to themselves and they'll say, "How do I get out of here? How do I figure this out?" Or at the end of a fight, they'll say, "Is that the last one? Are we clear?" And that is
Yeah,
is
and they
such a
always give you that
yeah.
audio cue.
Oh my god, it's such a help because in that game, I feel like I have to Metal Gear Solid my way all the time because I don't want to make noise. Which, by the way, sometimes when you're going through like a gate or a garage, or you have to lift something up and drop it down. These fuckers make a lot of noise for zombies that are like all around, and you got the wolf, and you got all these different factions basically gunning for your head. You guys, you make a lot of noise walking through that environment
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes you out of the way. It takes you like out of the realism.
Yeah,
Whenever they do that kind of stuff, I absolutely get it. Especially like after you sneak through an entire area, and now the game, the way the game makes those transitions, like where you can't go back. Let's say like that area where you first see the shamblers,
right.
you can kill the shamblers, or you can decide to ignore them. If you ignore them, but you definitely have to get rid of the runners, and you go for that door. As soon as you start opening the door, the shamblers are gunning for you, and the game will cut off right as the shamblers are about to get there. But if you were to reload that whole thing and kill the shamblers, they do the same animation just without any of the intensity. So, but it's nice. It's nice that the game provides the those options to kind of like make you feel like, oh my god, I got to get through this door, and I got to hit the buttons and whatever to get through. And she will do that in several locations. Like Ellie will do that in several transitions where she, like, even though you just killed everybody in the back, she'll still block off the door and move some furniture just to move on to the next section. And I thought that was a pretty cool touch. I really want to talk about the game mechanics in here, because in The Last of Us One, I always felt that that game was like a more grounded version of Uncharted, where in Uncharted you jump, you do all this stuff, and in The Last of Us One, you're just stuck on you're kind of stuck. You're just walking and you just simply interact with things as they're allowed for you to interact with. In this game, you can definitely tell that they had a lot of lessons learned from Lost Legacy and Uncharted 4. And even though this game feels very derivative from Uncharted 4, I personally do not have a problem with that at all. Uncharted 4 had great mechanics, it had great puzzles, and this game derives from a lot of the puzzles that they did in Uncharted 4, especially with the rope. Um,
Best rope
and you
mechanics
know
in
what?
any game ever.
Yeah, I appreciate that they borrowed, or that they did a game that uses a lot of Uncharted 4. Pretty much, it lets you know that they had a good base. People may not like that. People may. Some people may think like, well, why do another game literally with the same mechanics, but just slap a different title on it? And honestly, I don't care, because Call of Duty does that every year, and people still play Call of Duty. It's a great engine. It has great mechanics. So why not with this? So
Yeah, I
I
mean, my
really do
mentality is like,
appreciate.
if it's like, don't, if it's not broken, don't fix it. You got to rope. The rope
Yep.
mechanics work. There are plenty of times where I thought the game would break because I did some dumb thing with the rope and I threw it over a place where it clearly wasn't meant to go, and the rope is almost flipping out. I'm like, okay, is this gonna break? Am I gonna have to like reload this? But yeah, it's like refining those gameplay mechanics that when you throw the rope, it feels like if you're throwing a rope. When you're climbing something, it feels like you're climbing something. So it's like, I think they're going more towards like the realism aspect as opposed to reinventing new ways to explore the environment, which I appreciate, because how many times have you experienced a game with quote unquote the same gameplay mechanics, but they feel different. They feel like they belong in this
Oh yeah.
game, as opposed to it's just a
Yeah.
rehash of like a Call of Duty gun or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, Ellie is not jumping like 50 feet
Yeah,
to make a big ass jump. Like, the game makes it fairly clear that even though you can jump, Ellie jumps pretty much maybe a little bit more than I can jump. You know what I mean? Like, you feel like, oh yeah, it's a legitimate jump. It's not like an Uncharted that you're like jumping between buildings or something like that.
and I don't know if
Even
you
though that
notice
does
this.
happen in this game.
Yeah, I don't know if you notice this too, but I feel like there's a weight to her jump that when she lands wrong,
Yeah.
like you can clear a ledge and land safely on the other ledge, and it's weighty. but it's like when you it's those cases where you just barely make it and your body or Ellie's body slams up against the side of any given object, and it's like, ooh, did I take damage? Is that gonna hurt? Am I gonna lose
Mm,
grab? You have that moment where it's like, I don't know if I'm gonna make this jump, and I don't know if Ellie's gonna be able to make it over the ledge.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I do appreciate even though the game is derivative, the mechanics work, and the game plays really well. I also appreciate that the game builds upon what you learn in the first game. Like you're not relearning to use a bow. You're not like dealing with your weapon sway. The game assumes like Ellie already knows how to use a weapon, and you can improve the weapon to reduce the sway even more. But the like skills that you've learned from the last game, like Ellie learned, or that she was taught by Joel through the backstory. I'm glad that the game didn't have you do like a God of War where you forgot everything and
Right.
you're like starting over.
That's a
God,
retcon certain
that feels
things.
so
I don't like those at all. If it, if it's
yeah.
an iteration on a previously released game, I think that it's safe to say that let's get away from that. You know, oh,
Mm,
let's keep the hammers, let's keep the axes, let's keep the experience that we learn, and maybe introduce different ways to utilize these things, like The Last of Us Two
yeah,
has done, or just get rid of them entirely.
yeah,
One thing I'm
yeah,
not a big fan of, or obviously I know that this is one of those things where it's like, like the Batman vision, where you kind of like have to
yeah,
figure out what's going on. It's like a visual radar of the
yeah,
sounds in the environment, and on one hand, I understand that it's like when you hear sounds, a reasonable person can pinpoint where that sound is coming from, and with the L1, the R1 button, when you do that, oftentimes I feel like it's there's a depth there that that gets me 9 times out of 10. It's like I don't know if this guy is right behind this wall and just being real quiet, or he's two rooms down. So it adds that
mhm.
level of like fear of like I can't just run around this corner guns blazing. I have to like really knuckle down, knowing that there's enemies in the environment still that I need to take care of.
Yeah, that feature when you play the game in hard is turned off, which is fine. It's fine. I feel like if you play the game in hard, it's to add to the immersion of the game. So you would remove like any accessibility options and like you would probably remove like to be able to find items a lot easier, and try to beat it like if this was like a real life problem. I do appreciate that. It's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. But the game, with that challenge, the game does have a much better checkpoint system than the first one. Like it is. I love the checkpoint system. I love how it works. You can even make a checkpoint like in between your fight. If you let's say like if you killed a few enemies and you got to a section, you haven't finished the section or the encounter, the game will still checkpoint like, oh, you killed this enemy, so this enemy's here, and then you killed that enemy's
Right,
there.
it's like a
And
soft
if
save.
you get killed by,
Yeah, if you're
yeah,
familiar with
and if
PC
you get
stuff, it's
killed
like
by
a
another
soft.
enemy,
Yeah.
yep. I love that. I love that. I love that the game is very accessible because the game has a lot of dynamics. Like, and this is where I love the human encounters way more than the clicker and the runners and the stalkers and the those are great. Those encounters are great. Don't get me wrong. But the human encounters are amazing. Like that first portion where you first start encountering humans, which is the WLF, the wolves, um, and you start seeing how they interact as they find you or as they see you. Like shortly after, like Shimmer dies. God bless Shimmer.
Too soon.
And and you get trapped and Dina saves you. That very first encounter for me was like the game doing a very good introduction of what you're going to expect. Like if you kill an enemy and somebody else sees it, the reaction that they have and what they say is amazing. The way that enemies act as you start killing off more of them and they keep finding more bodies, they start becoming more careless. They want a gun for you. They want to get you more, so they take less cover. They're a lot more aggressive. And or like whenever they identify where you are, like, oh, she's here. by the car. You know what I mean? Like the game makes the enemies like say all this stuff that to me that's a level of detail that I didn't expect from this game at all, making the experience that much more enjoyable whenever you're having these encounters with the enemies. I still think that by far my favorite section of dealing with human enemies is that section where after you jump to the apartment, you know what I'm talking about. You jump to the apartment at the first time you see the dogs, but you don't encounter them. Then you just jump to the apartment and you make work your way down from the apartment,
Right.
and you're like slowly moving through Seattle, heading towards I think it's the TV station.
You're trying to get to
I
the TV
think
station, yeah, with the hanging bodies.
and that very first open section that has runners, clickers and humans was amazing. Like that to me has been my favorite section so far. Just because how the game introduces like enemy patrols and introduces like, hey, the enemies can interact with clickers. You can kind of lure them into a section that is just full of runners and clickers and whatever, and like seeing them interact with each other. uh, I still feel like that is one of my most favorite sections in the game right now, especially like how you can go all Metal Gear in there and play straps and do all this stuff.
Yeah. So while we're on topic, we could focus on the gameplay mechanics because I feel like we just kind of went right into that. We didn't obviously we're not gonna circumvent the story. It's just I think that we need to get through like what our favorite moments of the game, and I think that the two really stand out to me that are not story driven. The two that clicked for me was the initial run through the train station, the red room.
Oh yeah,
The red room was
the
the
red room. I
yeah,
like that.
the red room was when I had my aha moment where it's like at that point of the game I didn't have a lot of ammo. I just expended a bunch with the fight right before it. I'm thinking that I'm out in the clear. I just got to get through this train station, see the light, we're good to go. Nah, homie, there's still a whole section of enemies you have to deal with. Now this section has both undead, clickers, and runners, I believe, and then also the WLF troops waiting there. And the only thing I had equipped at the time was a glass bottle, and I was like, well, if Doom has told me anything, is that it's so cool when enemies fight one another. And I just kind of hail married it, and I threw my I think it was actually a Molotov, and I threw the Molotov like not in any particular direction, but just to sit back and watch the chaos unfold. It was such a delight. I was sitting there giggling like a schoolgirl, just watching them just get just destroyed by the runners. And then I think there was one enemy left, and I took him out with one shot. So that for me was like my aha moment. Like, okay, I can get down with this. There's levels to this. It's not just shimmy around doors and quietly take out people with your knife. It's kind of like, okay, I can make shit happen here. I can make scenarios play out in a way that the game allows you to. It's so dynamic, and
Mm-hmm.
like you said, with the enemy patrols, how they almost start to panic when obviously we know that every individual enemy has their own name or their own position, and other enemies dynamically say, oh, he got John, oh, he killed Marsha, or she killed this one.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like it adds like a level of personality that enemies kind of know each other, and that they're always on routine patrol, so you kind of get that like the gravity of the situation there. But that for me was kind of like the best. The second best, which happens a little later on, is your introduction to the Seraphites with the whistling. So once you get into this foresty area a little later on, they start to whistle instead of talking. So the regular WLFs, they'll say, "Oh, she's behind the car. She's running away. She's trying to run away," which I hear a lot because I'm always trying to run away and get a better position. But the
Mm-hmm.
second you get almost spotted by the Seraphites, and they start whistling, you're fucked, because they're using whistles to basically locate your position. So if they think they see you, they'll whistle at a different octave. If they see you, they'll do a higher whistle, which is more intense. So basically if they only whistled once, that means that he either heard something, but I'm not fully spotted yet, so I have time to like reposition and get cover. But once you hear the fucking whistles go off, all over, it's time it's time to get your shit together. So
Oh
that
yeah.
it's fun because like I said, the pacing in this game is left something to be desired. I'm definitely going to go into the accessibility options to tweak how often it prompts me to like move the shit forward.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel that I've had encounters last 20 seconds, and I've had encounters last 3, 4, 5 minutes, because it's
Mm-hmm.
just the AI is so smart when it comes to repositioning. Even like if I take out my shotgun and I'm 100% sure I'm gonna blast this guy in the face and I miss, and I'm like they're staring at each other, they'll run away to get a better position to shoot me. And I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate the fact that you can't just run up on somebody that has a gun and
Oh
decide you want to hit them. They will hit
no.
every single shot, and even if they don't like, even if it's not a kill shot, Ellie will take a step back or she'll fall on her ass and try to like scramble out of the way.
have you have you ever been shot with a rifle yet? Where you see like Ellie like hold on to her gut or wherever she gets shot and she'll like scream in pain like oh my god. Like
Yeah,
have you ever had that
yeah,
happen?
that and when you start getting hit with arrows, that I don't know if you've gotten to that part where
Oh
where you get hit with the
no, not
arrow.
yet, not yet.
You basically press R1 to dig the arrow out of your arm. It is kind of intense because you can't do anything in the
Oh yeah.
midst. You have to find cover. It doesn't. You get an ability later on in the game where a shot that should have killed you will leave you on 1 health so that you can reposition, get a better grasp on the situation, and probably heal up. But it's those times where you get hit with an arrow and the arrow's stuck in your arm and you have to like dig it out while you're in the middle of combat. So that there's just so many, and it's good because in a game like 20, 30, 40 hours, you want to have a diverse palette of options when you get into these
Mm-hmm.
encounters, much in the same way, like I said again, Halo, or in some aspects like Gears of War situation, where you have to decide if you're going to use the little bit of ammo that you have now, or are you going to use your shotgun ammo? I only have 4 bullets. Well, if I take out the rifle and I headshot this guy, then maybe there's a level of like, I mean, you could brute force your way through anything, but it's
Mm-hmm.
in your best interest to use the options available to you. So at the end of an encounter, you're not basically starting from zero, which in the early parts of this game, I was unloading everything I had at these people. I was picking up bricks, I was throwing stuff, I was finishing them. But at the end, I'm left with no bullets, and now I have to, no, I get to scour the area for any kind of loose ammo, and good luck finding ammo or anything that lands in tall grass, because it's
Yeah.
just, you
Yeah.
might as well just keep it moving at that point. So the gameplay is probably the thing that's keeping me. I mean, the story is a story. We'll get to that in a minute. It's just a bunch of people being real shitty to each other. Uh, but the gameplay is kind of like I'm almost excited as to how what is it going to throw at me next? Like, because it does the whole jump scare mechanic. We're all familiar
Mm-hmm.
with that.
Oh yeah.
It's got me a couple times. I'll be serious. I play this
Oh
game.
dude, that when you get the
Yeah.
bow and arrow.
Oh man. And I play this game predominantly at night. I mean, we talk about it all the time, every night. But I'll be sitting here, and it's always when I least expect it. Some shit happens, and I have to like fumble around and figure out what I'm gonna do, which I appreciate. But it doesn't lean too heavy on that. It's few and far between. But the anxiety kicks in where uh, every encounter is a new environment, right? So you have to figure. You can't. It's not like the same old environments out in the open, or how do you say, like an open world type of GTA where you could just
Mm-hmm.
run around and fucking guns blazing. It's kind of like, okay, how do I use this environment to my advantage? There's one particular fight that's a little bit further than you are, where it's at a marina with boats and whatnot, and there are different levels, but their levels are like so close together that you see enemies hopping over just to get a better position, and you're trying to figure out what level they're on, whether they're on 2 or 1, and it's just it is a mess. Like, I have had really clean fights, and I've had really sloppy ones where I just barely
Oh
make
yeah.
it out
Oh
alive.
yeah. I feel like the game does really well in keeping it fresh by introducing or slowly introducing like different characters and different enemies. That's why I really appreciate them adding dogs. Like the dogs. the addition of the dogs is it's almost it, it was almost necessary because when you play the first game, like the first game had a formula. It was like you're gonna encounter humans, you're gonna explore, you're gonna encounter monsters after humans, and then you're gonna explore. Or instead of having an exploration section, but you were always alternating between humans and monsters. This game does not have that specific pattern. It does have the pattern is I am building up to a set piece, or at least I've noticed so far that that's what it's trying to do. Um, but other than that, like it really does keep things fresh because in the first game you were just fighting humans, and you had it was literally like, oh, you're just in a different area but doing the same thing. In this game, it is not like that. And when you first encounter dogs, that changes everything. Immediately, like that from then on out, the
So I'm
game
not
is
too.
different.
I'm not too. Obviously I played the first one a long time ago, and I'm struggling to remember exactly what exactly went down. But um, in that game was the fights that you encounter, were they story driven at all, or is it just like, hey, here's a section, we need enemies, we're gonna give the monsters another try? Here I think it's like when the story is progressing, the enemies feel like they belong in that area. They're either on patrol or there's some shit going down and they're in the area. Like I said, there's different factions. So there's the Seraphites, there's the WLF, there who are the former Fireflies. There's actually former Fireflies still, I think, mucking about. If and not spoiling anything, but I've read certain documents that lead me to believe that the Fireflies are still a thing. They may or may not be. Um, but just like with the introduction of the dogs, I'm a dog lover and I fucking hate these dogs. And I hated them when I first got there because they do this real slick shit of now adding another dynamic of the shit you need to worry about, which is your scent trail. And I don't know about you, but I completely fudge it every single time. Like I figured like, oh, this is a new mechanic. There's a scent trail, so I can maybe use this to my advantage. No, once a dog has your scent, you are screwed. You are absolutely 100% screwed. You can run away if you want, but the dogs will find you. And I tend to take the dogs out first if I can. I would, once you get the upgrade to silence your weapon, I'm usually the dogs are usually the first thing I take out because you can have a perfect encounter with everything and have it all go to shit once the dogs show up because they will find you and then they will attack you, and then once that happens you might as well just to either reload the save if you want to do a clean, stealth filled run, or just kind of go out guns blazing. But yeah, the dogs add a very interesting. It's all like a flush out mechanic, where you can't even get close to them without them smelling you, which I think is very smart. It adds a level of uh, you can't cheese this fight. You can't just hide, wait for somebody, kill them, and dwindle down the numbers. It's like, all right, well, you have to go loud at some point because once you kill the dog, it's all they know something's up. It's like that. It's almost like an elevation of intensity where it's like when they don't know you're there, everything's kind of like, hey, we're just talking, we're having a casual conversation, walking the dog. As soon as the dog dies, that level goes up. They know something's around, obviously, because you killed the dog, and then it drastically goes up from there. So it's interesting how any player approaches like a fight. This is not an open world game. The environments are very vast if you think about it with the level of detail, but they're dense. It's not like a vast open world where you're walking on the field and whatever. There are things to jump on, to hide behind, to get inside, to chill out. You can go prone, which is awesome. I love going prone, especially when I almost get spotted and I just duck out in the grass and they can't see me anymore. Um, but you did mention the set pieces. This game uses set pieces, but they use it in my opinion, they use very sparingly. There's not a set piece after every, obviously now that you're in the theater, that's kind of like your hub for now on. You go do a mission, come back, some story happens, go out, do another mission. Eventually you'll move from hub to hub, but the environments don't really call for much of. It's a very this game, if we haven't said it already, is very linear. It's absolutely, I would say it's like a linear game who sort of masquerades as an open world game sometimes, and that's okay because this is that game. This is the Uncharted's. This is you can't go. There are not a lot of visible walls, but like they use the environment to say, nah, you can't go there, homie. You can't go right. when you go left. But I don't really care too much about it. It doesn't annoy me as much as it does in other games where you're literally walking up against an invisible wall. Here, it seems practical. It's like in this situation, I would not be able to get across this giant fissure in the ground because, I'll die. In real life, you wouldn't even chance that. So they use the environment to gate your progress or to kind of funnel you in this linear direction, but in like the most practical, real ass life way, not just an invisible wall. There are doors that I thought that I can get through that I can't. That I'm like, if I really wanted to in the real life, I probably could have dug out all these weeds and opened this door. But I get it. There also is obviously collectibles. There are chests or locked safes that you can open up either for ammo or sometimes you get weapon upgrade, not weapon upgrades, but almost like ability upgrades where you unlock another section of an ability tree that you can put points into it. Points in this game are attributed to or are visualized as stimulants. What would you call those?
I mean, the she picks up vitamins. She picks up and like they're typical like typically pill boxes, but they can also be like medicine. I associate them with like vitamins. I love when the game just gives you like singles. You're like, oh, one pill,
Yeah.
two pills, three pills.
And then you find a pack of 17. Like, yeah, give me that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I,
I appreciate the progression system in this game being simplified in comparison to the first one.
yeah.
It is much better now, for
And
sure.
it seems practical. Although the use of like magazines and books to like open your eyes to certain things, as far as like, oh, now I can make two extra smoke bombs, and now, now I can see things
And
clearer in
now
Batman
with the
mode.
I understand how to do that. Okay.
If only it was this easy in real life.
Yeah.
So as far as
She
like,
read it, didn't understand it, had the vitamins. She's like, aha.
oh yeah, super smart now. These must be brain pills.
Yeah.
Um, so as far as like, obviously there's trinkets you can collect in the game. There's a ton of letters that you can read, and I really encourage anybody that's playing this game is to do the two things. One, go in those accessibility options and turn down the frequency at which they push you forward in the story. And two, make sure that you're exploring the environment, because the environment is so lush with just like, like I said, like a level of Pixar detail that you will miss if you run past it. And it's a shame because you're gonna get two types of people. You're gonna get the people like you who are gonna scour every inch of every nook of every cranny and will not progress until they do so, or you're gonna get the guy that's gonna blaze through it and be like, "Well, this game was kind of mediocre." Um, as far as the gameplay is concerned, you're not really on the horse for that very long. I appreciate the horse. There were often times where the game most certainly wanted me to be on the horse, and I didn't want to get on the horse because I wanted to check around what was going on. It sucks that you lose him kind of early in the game, but I guess as far as like a storytelling element, they kind of have to like do that. With a shock factor, I was kind of pissed that they killed the horse. Like, who kills a horse? Like, that's an asset. Even at the very least, kill the girl, get the horse.
I do appreciate though that you don't really appreciate or get to appreciate how long she's been with the horse until later in the game. You know
Right,
what I mean? Like
right,
when you're in these others in these other flashback sections where she's like, "Oh, Shimmer, stay here," and it's like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, for whatever like whatever the time frame is. So she's been with that horse for a really long time. The game doesn't really tell you that. It's just like, oh, the horse died.
right.
You know what I
So
mean? Like,
I
and
feel
really
like
your connection to that horse.
we're going into the section of like storytelling when it's like there's only one more thing I wanted to touch upon as far as the gameplay is concerned, is those set pieces that I
Oh
was
yeah,
getting at. So the set pieces, like I was saying earlier, they're few and far between. I'm curious as to hear your take on. I think we've gotten up to, I want to say, maybe three big ones up to this point.
yeah. The very first one that you get is whenever you're running away with Abby, and you have all these zombies, a la World War Z, or a la Game of Thrones almost because it's in the snow and
Right,
whatever.
right.
You're that very first set piece was really cool. And I appreciated that section where the game even swapped you from your main character and the antagonist. And the next set piece that I saw was the one in the train where you're running towards the theater, but you're trying to escape the tunnels. That was also a pretty intense, pretty cool. And then the very last one is with the car, where your buddy
Yes.
where your buddy's like trying to turn on the car and you're shooting all these people and he drives back and then he drives forward and then they follow you in this car. It's a pretty intense scene. Did not expect for that to turn out the way it did. Where like then they run into infected and I was like, oh shit. You know what I mean? I did not expect that to happen.
Yeah, because I think we're at the point now where we've been, caught up with these set pieces like the Halos and the Modern Warfares and the Call of Duties, where at the end of those set pieces, except for that one time at the Russian airport in Call of Duty, no Russian, they typically end out in your favor, right? It typically ends up with
Yeah.
everybody dead. You're sitting there, or either getting up in like the Iron Man pose, breathing out of breath with fire behind you, successful. But with this game, those set pieces, and much as in like if you think about the whole Abby situation, where obviously we know what that happens, uh, they don't always turn out in your favor, story wise. Like as far you can't like,
Yeah.
there is I haven't seen much in the way if you do exactly what the game is telling you to do, there is no fail state, but I don't feel particularly good after those set pieces. Like
Yeah.
those are
Yeah.
great moments, like especially the Abby one, where it's like, wait, what does she do? What are her buttons? How do I do the thing? And she's just kind of fucking run, dude. Get behind the thing. And I appreciate that they let you play it as Abby as opposed to Joel, because
Yes.
I didn't see that coming. I was one of those people that was completely dark in this game for a long time,
Yep.
and when that
Yep.
turn of face
Worth it.
happened,
Totally worth it.
yeah, when that turn of face happened, it was like, oh, this bitch. But yeah, Tommy, I think is a great character. I'm glad that they fleshed him out a little bit more. We'll get into like the story here, whatever. But Jesse is the guy that you was speaking of, who, if I'm not mistaken correctly, he's the one that picks you up in the Jeep, and that's when you meet him and you bring him back to the
Yeah.
hotel. The only thing I didn't like about that, the only thing I didn't like about that particular scene was that all of a sudden you have all the ammo. All of a sudden,
Yeah, and the first game did that too. Like, there's a moment where you get hung upside down, and there's all these infected coming, and you have a six shooter, and right before that section, I had like three bullets,
yeah.
whatever, like small amount of bullets. But then the section suddenly gives you infinite ammo for you just to go and wail away at these at that specific scene
Yeah.
for the infected. So yeah, not they have done it before, and I'm not gonna lie. As soon as I found out I had infinite ammo, I was just firing like it wasn't a Gatling gun, but pretty close to the same amount of bullets as a Gatling gun. I
Yeah,
was I was just
it
shooting
took
and shooting and shooting.
it took me a second to realize I can go ham with this pistol, because I was really like in the beginning I was really picking my shots. Like, I got 3 bullets, I guess I got to make them count. And then after that she
Yeah.
reloaded. I was like, fucking A, man, that's and I was on a mission to take out all those runners. But yeah, like
Mm-hmm.
the whole, once I kind of got grounded, it was like, okay, the fun time is over. Like, this guy keeps on crashing. We need to get out of here.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
really like their usage of like military vehicles as, not just, people not just driving around in Honda Civics and being all, yeah, that's what you would do. You would go to an armory, you would pick up a bunch of Humvees, and there you go. Now you're the army. So that, to me, that as a storytelling element, that makes perfect sense. And then as you get into different, because you'll get into different compounds, let's call it, you will see, like, let's just get into the story. So the story here is, I don't know, man. You want to take it? Like, I feel like you're better at, running it from the beginning. So we already know that we're in Jackson. We already know that we're, in a happy place. We're in a very happy place. Things start to go south on a roving patrol, if I'm not mistaken, and like just a routine as roving patrol.
Yeah, and you're you're pretty much going through, and if we're talking about the same one, is Ellie goes out with Dina, and that whole section was pretty nice because you're like kind of seeing like what's in the outskirts of Jackson, and you're going through the houses, you're exploring, you go into the supermarket, and you pretty much just kind of go through like this intense new scene. And I like that in this game, Ellie hasn't told anybody that she's immune. And so she still like puts on the show, or she puts on the mask. So anytime you encounter spores, she puts on the mask. And right after that, the game switches and introduces this new character that you've never met before with a group of people. And this guy comes out and he's like, "Hey, let me show you something." And they show them Jackson. So they're on a mission. They obviously want to get somebody on that mission. So the very first thing I thought was like, "Oh, these must be the Firefly guys that Joel just completely annihilated whenever he was up there." Um, and as you play as this bad guy or a bad person, I mean, and which is Abby, and you get through, and she runs eventually into Joel in the night. You know what I mean? She's running around trying to make her way to Jackson, and she encounters a bunch of infected, and she runs into Joel, and as soon as she says, "Hey, I'm Joel," and this guy says, "Hey, I'm Tommy," you can see it in her eyes, like, "Oh my god,"
And it
which is
clicks.
a great.
It clicks in such a way that I knew exactly what the fuck was about to go down because, and this
Yep.
is attributed to like the facial animation and all the advances in technology. You can literally see her face twitch in such a way like this is the fucking guy. Like we don't know who
Yep.
Abby is. We don't know who this person is,
No.
what her motives are. But she like to me it was like what the fuck, man? These guys just saved your life. And what happens next is something that I didn't see coming. And so basically, for long story short, they Abby kidnaps Joel and Tommy, and she is surrounded by what appears to be fireflies from the first game.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, you quickly realize that they're wearing WLF, who is a new faction, Wolf for short, who's a new faction that they introduced in this game, and they're basically on a mission to find Joel. Like that is the lead up to what these guys are doing out in the middle of nowhere next to Jackson. So they go and they find Joel. They take him up. They basically torture him, and you're Abby on a patrol with Dina, and you get to where Joel supposedly is. I mean, your whole mission was to find Joel because they failed to report. So you're going out,
Hmm.
and obviously the story is that Joel and Tommy can take it. They're probably the best at what they do. So they're out on patrol, and Dina and Ellie are tasked at finding them. Ellie finds them at a beautiful mansion. Like this is like such a gorgeous. Like one of the things that I noticed was like this little mansion next to what I assume was a ski resort at one point. And they just find these guys just laying in on Joel. Abby gets in there. She tries to save the day. Unfortunately, she fails, and Abby, by her own hand, kills Joel with a golf club. So Abby was able to get a couple hits into one of the guys. I guess she like cuts his face, but it's all for naught because at the end of the day, they end up killing Joel and leaving Tommy and Ellie alive, which to me seemed weird. Like if they were just killers on a hunt, they did a really poor job in leaving witnesses. So early on in the
And the
story,
game even later on, the game even questions that. Like Dina and Ellie have this conversation. It's like, why do you think they left you alive? And like that's the mystery. That's the driver of the game. It's like, why did these people do that?
right? And they even say it at one point that they were sloppy. But if you kind of read between the lines here, you know about the secret that Joel has from Ellie, that the whole reason why they were there and what happened in the hospital in the first game was Joel made the decision to basically take back Ellie because they were about to operate on her because obviously she's the one that anybody has ever found to be immune to the disease. And the only way that they can make a proper vaccine or to basically save the human race in their eyes is to extract whatever it is that's in her brain, effectively killing Ellie. And when Joel finds out, he says, "Nah, son," and he kills everybody there, takes her back. So what I'm thinking is that these guys are on a retribution mission. They're out to get just Joel. They succeeded their mission, and now Ellie is on a full fucking Rambo mode, trying to like basically go back and she doesn't want she wants to kill all of them for sure. However, she wants Abby. Um, and as you progress through the various sections in the game and the story becomes more clear, you quickly realize that it's basically that eye for an eye type thing. Oh, you killed one of mine, I'm gonna kill one of yours. It's not about factions. It's not about basically the backdrop of the story is the warring factions, the Seraphites against the WLF. Jackson is just kind of sitting pretty with their fucking Christmas lights, hanging out. They're not really at war with anybody. They're just kind of chilling in their own little nook in the corner. But Abby is very much
They always talk about hunters. They always talk about hunters in Jackson, but you never really see that in the early sections of the game. You only see it in the first game, and have no idea why the hunters are attacking them. So I don't think the game ever made clear like why are people still trying to invade Jackson, so to
right.
speak.
So the Seraphites are this. I want to say, what would you call them? Like a religious fanatical group of
Yeah, yeah,
hun-
yeah. Almost like in the what was it, the Walking Dead? There was that one group that had the
yeah.
W's and the crazy people.
And what sets them apart from the other factions is that they refer to the the environment, the world, before the outbreak as the old world, and they typically don't use any firearms. It's all about bows and arrows and axes and all that stuff. It's like they don't want to use anything that associates them with the old world. It's a new world. They have this leader, which you will meet at some point. So for me, the story is very much It's a retribution story. It's a vengeance story. It's Ellie trying to take vengeance on the people that killed Joel, who, as you will find out, was very respected in the community. But there's little subtle nuances that kind of like bring the full gravity. And one of the most iconic things for me is the guitar. Joel makes a guitar from scratch. He gives it to Ellie, and this is like a whole thing where it's like 5 years. He teaches her how to play it, and then you're sitting there with the controller. You're strumming away to what is the song that she sings to Dina? Uh, I have it's one of my favorite songs, and when I didn't know the song was in the game, and it's "Take on Me" by Aha. Uh, and when she starts
Yes,
singing it,
yes.
it's so good. There's something that needs to be said about the sound design. I know the graphics are great and the story is awesome, but like just the fucking sound design and the audio cues about when you're about to get spotted, or when she strums where you're strumming on the guitar and basically playing these songs. It adds a lot to the story. It adds a lot to because on its surface, Ellie is just kind of like, whatever, man. I'm just doing what I have to do to survive. We're over here killing zombies, doing our thing, but she hides a lot of her emotions, and I don't know if that's a product of her. Well, yeah, I know exactly what that is. It's a product of her growing up in an environment where it's like there's no time for emotions. It's get shit done and move on to the next activity. So these scenes of talking about Joel and his shitty taste in movies and her shitty taste in like comic books and the guitar playing, it almost feels like those real world activities are so out of focus in that society. You don't spend a lot of time in Jackson, so I think that's a product by design. They don't want you to get too comfortable with how they've turned the shitty world into like a livable world that's reminiscent of the world that they left behind. But those situations of when they're talking, especially Dina and Ellie, about what are you gonna do when you get back home? Oh, I'm probably gonna watch a space movie. Oh, what kind of movie? Oh, it's about this guy. And they just having, if for me, it feels disjointed in a way that would probably feel that way if I were in that situation. So I appreciate the storytelling aspect, just paying so close attention to the mundane that it actually feels significant, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that section, that very first flashback that you have with Ellie and Joel, where they're going through the museum, and Joel is giving his references to Jurassic Park, I was like, oh, did you learn that in that movie? It's just, and everybody knows which movie he's talking about, but they're not saying the name. But it was great. It was really good. It was a good touch. It was a good way to, and that is the game. And I don't know how in the future when like people like other generations play this game, like how would they be able to get the context of what he's talking about? But at least in our generation, we're all like we've all seen Jurassic Park 1, 2, 3, and all the other ones. But yeah, that was a pretty nice scene of them just kind of interacting, and then giving you that surreal like, hey, I'm talking about something that you, the player, knows about.
Yeah, it kind of
um
like brings you into the story as well. It's like, yeah, I know when Ian Malcolm says that's a one big pile of shit. I love that part of the movie, and here he is, Joel referencing it. Uh, and in the same breath, I think it was really smart the way they, that scene when they're in the space capsule and they're about to, they're sitting there flipping all the switches. He could have given her a cassette tape about anything. It could have been a song that we all remember. It could have been, but they chose a real life audio of a space mission, with the cutting out and the fuzz and the static and basically the liftoff, and that one scene was probably one of my best storytelling scenes. Was like, the world is fucked, but this guy is basically, we'll all say it, he's basically taking this girl as his daughter. It's Ellie is his Sarah that he missed out when she died in the first game, and he's trying so hard to make amends of what happened. And I didn't get it until I got to the story point that made me understand why Ellie is the way that she is. And I don't know if you've gotten to that part yet, but it was a big question as to why is Ellie such a dick to Joel? Because they don't make that relevant. They don't make, like, there's a juxtaposition there where it's like the time that they're in the museum to when we fast forward to current time, where she's very short with him, she's very distant, and you don't know why. It's not plain until you get to that, like you said, that storyline, or excuse me, that back in time, like, hey, 2 years ago this happened. Oh, that's why she's so short with Joel, and now it kind of all makes sense. But for the first half of this game, I was wondering, like, why does Ellie have such a grudge with Joel? Like, she loves him, obviously. They do a bunch of stuff together, but there was always that fucking chip on her shoulder that I was like, did I miss something? Did she find out about what happened at the hospital, or did something else happen in between that they haven't told us yet? But if you get to that part of the game, and if it's bothering you, you're feeling exactly what you're supposed to feel, because there is a revelation that happens, I want to say maybe at the 16 17 hour mark, that says, okay, this is the reason why. And you can't feel anything but sympathy for her, because in that situation, in that story moment, she has no choice. So it's very interesting to see my personal opinion on the storytelling aspect. A lot of this stuff is foreshadowing. It's like, you have to be paying attention. You have to know what's going on, and you have to use your brain in some of the aspects, because you could probably get to the point that I'm trying to make on your own. But if you're not, if you're taking the story for how it's presented to you, sometimes it might feel a little bit like you're left wondering, like, am I supposed to know what's going on? Am I supposed to know? Oh, no, it's not, because we're going to go back 2 years and they're going to explain what the hell's going on. So I appreciate that, because, like you said, in a 40-hour
and
game.
that's the carrot. That's the carrot that the game gives you to continue moving through the areas. And I'll tell you, like playing through the game. Sometimes you play through the sections in the game. I'm not gonna say like the game is a super nice experience to play. Like it's not comfort food. You know what I mean? I don't play this game to feel better.
Yeah, no, in fact, I agree. I
But
have to really pick and choose the days in which I play this game, because I know that at the end of my session, I'm going to feel like garbage. There is no
yeah,
happiness at this game. This game is not for, this game is the thing you watch before SpongeBob to cleanse your palate. And you
yeah,
have to know that going in. So if I've heard a lot of stuff going on the internet, and a lot of stuff going on as far as Twitter, and people discussing the game in its entirety. And let's just get the one thing out here in the open. The whole transgender thing, I have no problem with. In fact, I appreciate the fact that it's there. I appreciate the inclusivity, and a lot of people are saying, well, they of course they're going to make this person the antagonist. Well, how much representation of this specific dynamic do we have to work with here? None. The answer is none. It's either what's the Saints Row level of fucking zany and wacky, or a more grounded situation where you're people that are SJW have such a fucking stick up their ass, and they're usually anywhere between 15 and 25. It's like, listen, your opinion doesn't matter on this. You know why it doesn't matter? Because you don't have the life experience to make a functional opinion or criticize something. Abby is a person first. She's not a woman. She's not a transgender. She's not a homosexual. She is a person first. So when I'm playing this game, I'm not looking for, oh, which one is it, whatever homophobic things these people are saying on the internet. I'm looking at the person first. And when you see the pain that this person is going through, you can relate to that. Like, for people saying like, oh, of course they made her the antagonist, of course they went this route with her, of course they made this her look a certain way. To me, that was a person. You know, if you're immature enough to look at somebody like that, and or a depiction of a person like that in any kind of media and get turned off by it, you need to look in yourself first before you start judging other people. So with that being said, I don't think it adds anything else to the story, but I don't think it certainly doesn't take anything away from the story.
It doesn't take anything away. And honestly, like I wasn't even curious, but as soon as I saw Abby, I was like, oh, this is what all the fuss was about.
Thank you.
I
That's the
mean,
exact
she's a
same
little.
thing I said.
Like, there was absolutely nothing in there that took me away from the game, because like you said, like I am playing the game just to kind of see what the developer and what the storytellers wanted to tell me with the story. You know what I mean? And I'm just taking the story. I'm just going through playing, like you said, like I am just enjoying how this game is slowly giving me this slow sipping whiskey of like, yo,
Yeah.
oh, this is the next thing that's happening. Oh, this is good. I like this.
And as far as
Um,
character development goes, when I see Abby, or if I'm in the presence of Abby in a cutscene, or if she's in the scene, I feel a sense of strength, a sense of leadership. She is a person not to be fucked with, and if you can convey that knowledge to me without shoving the fact that she's a transgendered individual down my throat, you got my vote, man. Like when she's in the scene, it's like, oh, she's the leader of these fucking knuckleheads. Because in that first dynamic where you see them all huddling around Tommy and Joel, you definitely get a sense that she is the leader of this fucking ragtag bunch. You got, your archetypes. You got your fucking jock. You got the fucking guy that's ready to shoot his pistol off at any given moment. You got the meek, young, short-haired girl, and then you have Abby, who is to me, I think every time she's in the scene, she takes it up. It's just her facial expressions, her one-track mind, and then she's not reckless either. She's a person that comes off as very trained, and when she's in the presence of other characters like Abby or Tommy, she steals the show. Like you can see, excuse me, with Ellie, she's very much a survivalist. She's making the environment work for her advantage. She's very smart. She's very tactical, but she's more brains than brawn. Where I think Abby's more brawn and brains than anybody else in the cast. So I could appreciate that kind of character development. She is They did exactly what they wanted to do with her. When as soon as she picks up that golf club, you know exactly this chick means business. And I didn't like her. When I first met her, obviously that's what they want you to think. You don't like this character, obviously, 'cause she's the bad person. She's the bad guy, quote unquote, not gender specific, obviously, but she is the antagonist of this bullshit. But as you get to learn Abby, and granted, I'm in the beginning stages of learning about that character, bro, I understand. In fact, I understand, and I probably would do the same fucking thing. And that, to me, was impactful in a way that supersedes the fact that whatever her gender is, whatever she was born as, whatever her sexual preferences, that doesn't matter. It's what happened to this girl at a young age to fuel her passion for the actions that she's taking now. Oh, it supersedes everything, and I appreciate that. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the world today. Obviously, we have to touch upon it, where gay LGBTQ is oftentimes shoved down people's throats, for good reason. Obviously, we have to be aware of the struggles, just the same way that minorities have to be aware of their struggles, and women have to be aware of it. We get it. But I'm so glad that they don't push the her gender or her her motive her excuse me her the fact that she's transgender down your throat. They present her as a
because it's
person first.
irrelevant.
It's 100% irrelevant. But I feel like we should have at least touched upon it, because the stuff that I see in the comments that I see and the videos that I see of people not even playing the fucking game and giving it bad reviews on Metacritic, it's just it's out of this world. And obviously we live in America and everybody's opinion matters, and I get that. But my opinion is those guys could fucking kiss a set of hairy balls, because I like Abby as a character. I think there's a complexity with that character that I didn't see with Joel. Joel's kind of one note. He's from Texas. He does the Texas things. And, you see in his apartment he's carving pictures of like fucking Indians and bears, and he's strumming on the guitar. Ellie's the same. She's came from a horrible situation. She's just kind of cope with life. Dina is this fucking carefree. I don't give a fuck what goes on. I'm gonna kiss you in the middle of a party, and who cares who's watching. Abby is one of the more complex characters that they really take their time fleshing out. And I'm almost 20 hours into this game, and it's changed my perspective on her motivations as a character. But not once did I question anything based on her sexual orientation or her gender. So I just want to put that out there. Abby's a good fucking character. Like, she's bad, for sure, because she fucking outed the main character so early in the story. But I get where she's coming from. And you know what? My opinion on her as a character might change at the end. But I'll tell you 120% that her transgender, or the fact that she's transgender, has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I really want to talk about, like, whenever Joel gets killed off very early. I really felt that when they did that, it wasn't a problem for me at all. But it was a way to kind of pass the page from, like, hey, this used to be the main character, but he's no longer the star of the show. So let's pass the page on Joel. He's going to be a supporting character now, and let's focus on the new characters that are coming into the story.
You didn't
So,
think it
for
was a
example,
little
we're not
abrupt,
seeing.
like the way that they handled
I
it?
did.
Yeah,
I did think it was abrupt, but I thought it was appropriate to kind of give the spotlight to the new characters that are
gotcha.
coming in. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
let's not focus so much on Joel. Let's focus on, like, hey, let's focus on Jesse. Let's focus on Dina. Let's focus on Ellie. Let's focus on Abby. So it was a way to, like not even Tommy is in the primary spotlight. He's also a supporting character
Yeah, but he's
right
kind of
now.
like
So I'm
in the
glad that.
foreground, I think. And I think maybe they may flesh him out a little bit more in like those back scenes, or maybe he's still kicking around somewhere. But yeah, he's very much in the foreground, and I appreciate that, because Ellie is, I want to say, what do you think, early mid-20s at this point?
She was 14, so she was 14, right? Whenever you were in The
Yes,
Last of Us 1, and then
yes.
4 years later, so she's definitely 18 now.
18. Okay, so yeah, they're definitely focusing on a character that not in the same breath as Joel. Joel, he's a little older. He has a lot more experience with things. He's definitely shot weapons before, and he's been, he can make snap decisions that an adult can. But I'm glad that they are putting the focus on just, 2, 3, 4 kids, because, let's be real here, teenagers still kid in my eyes, and how they're dealing with the drama that's has nothing to do with the apocalypse. It's kind of like the interpersonal drama between, who loves what character is sleeping with who, whatever. At the same
Yeah,
time,
that very beginning scene was very emblematic of what it's like to be a teenager.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
like, oh, did she kiss you? Oh, I don't care about her anymore. So
Oh, by the
I
way,
thought it
there's
was
zombies outside.
yeah, and like right after that scene where you come back from Hillcrest, from saving Jesse, yeah, And then you see how Dina immediately like goes to help Jesse and take his shoes off and whatever. You see like Ellie like walk away, and you could tell that she's bothered by that. You could tell that, oh, I wasn't Dina's center of attention. I'm trying to get her to like me more and whatever.
Yeah,
So
it's
she's
kind of
like in
like,
this
yeah, that's your
complicated.
ex-boyfriend. Why are you showing him so much attention? Type deal. Like I didn't think of it any other way than jealousy.
Yeah, and she is, even though she is in all these messed up situations, she is still a teenager and she still has like these emotions that she has to go through as she's growing up.
Right.
So I thought that was really appropriate for them to kind of include that in there. So and the cast, if you look at it in comparison to the first game, the cast is very young. Or at least the people that take the spotlight. It's a very young cast, and I like that about the story because like the very first game was a pretty depressing game, and honestly, like people talk about like how this game is very violent. The first game was just as violent as this. The only thing that changed was the generation of the console and the graphics. So definitely the game is not necessarily more violent than the first, but the way the story is developing is definitely different than the first. Absolutely different. And then even the tone of the first game is a lot different, a lot more different than the second game. And I appreciate that shift that they have and how they're presenting the story in this game as opposed to how they did it in the first game. Because there were no flashback scenes in the first game. Absolutely not.
Right, and
So
I can
I like
appreciate
the
the. I feel like in this day and age with the whole I call it the Netflix effect, where it's like my sessions with this game are very much in the same way. You know, with COVID-19 and quarantine going on, I find myself watching a lot of shows that I typically wouldn't watch, and a lot of these shows, much in the same way as like a Westworld or Game of Thrones situation, you get those bite-sized chunks where it's like you're at it for like an hour and a half, 2 hours at a stretch, and you have to end your playthrough at a certain resting point where it's like you didn't finish you didn't finish the sentence, but you're at a good stopping point where if you came back to it in a couple days you could remember what the hell was going on. And that is the most important. That if you're a game developer and you can't nail that, I will bounce the fuck right off your video game. Because there, and like I said, there's a pacing here where it's like in order for you to get a good chunk, a satisfying ingestion of what's going on, you have to play this game for an hour or two at most, because a lot of these sections, if you're going from Seattle to the aquarium, or if you're going from, you know, from point A to point B, that can take up about 2 hours of gameplay between the cutscenes, whatever bullshit they have you do in the middle, the fights. Sometimes the fights, like I said, they last 15 seconds, 15, or they can last up to 5 minutes. But the storytelling aspect and the environmental story aspect, I've had to end some sessions on notes that like I said, I feel like total garbage. Like you're feeling as if there's so many loose ends to try to maintain. You're basically spinning plates at this point, story wise. Like, okay, who's the WLF? What the hell is Abby doing? The dogs, this other faction. That note that I read, like it's a lot, and I appreciate that in a story driven game like this. I feel like a lot of times it's either two sides of the same coin. It's like either the gameplay is not engaging enough to keep me going, and the stories, I have to push through because I have to see what's going on, or the gameplay is fantastic and I can give a fuck about what's going on in the story. I feel like this game marries the two in such a way that it keeps me coming back for more, and it keeps me remembering what the hell's going on. Oftentimes if I take a couple days off of a game that I'm playing incessantly, I would have to either revert back to a save or watch my gameplay footage and see what the hell's going on. With this one, I feel like, okay, we're in the library. I know what I got to do. I got to make sure I got enough mats to get into the next encounter. Like I'm figuring shit out as I go along, and I like. There's a couple parts in this game that reuse old environments. Like you'll revisit environments either as the same character or as a different character, and the tone that they use with the setting the mood with the lighting, or you can tell people have passed through in a place that they've hunkered down for like a night or two, and you'll see they've written new notes or they've left new things for you to discover. It's amazing. I haven't played a game this good in a long time where I'm emotionally invested, but at the same time Like I want to see how good I can get that headshot with that rifle that I just put a 4x scope on. So I think that's a good stopping point here. Like I said, I'm 18 hours in. I'm pretty sure I'm up to the halfway point or close to it. I know that you're not too far behind. So ideally, we would like to do this in two big chunks. Part one and part two. But if we have to do like a maybe like a retrospective or like a clean up loose ends third video, we might do that. But thank you for enjoying joining us, and we appreciate people to watch this video, comment as if you would, just any other video. But I will tell you right now that try to stay away from spoilers. Do your fellow man a favor in these trying times. Trying to stay away from spoilers, and let us know what you think in the comments, or send us an email over at thegamermind.com. We're always looking for new ideas and comments. But yeah, just be kind to your fellow man. And my one advice to you is, if you're not feeling up to playing this game because of all the shit that's going on and the world is on fire, maybe take a break or two. I mean, I certainly have taken a day to kind of say, okay, I got to re-up on my, I gotta be emotionally and physically ready to sit down with this game. I might actually take today off because you feel it. You kind of feel it. It's not one of those games like a Persona
Yeah,
game where
yeah.
you can get in there and go out. This is a game about terrible people doing terrible things to one another. There's as far as I can see, there's no light at the end of the tunnel yet. But you see, and by the way, it rains a whole lot in fucking Washington. Just want to put that out there. I feel like every other
Oh
scene
yeah.
in this game is fucking pouring.
Yep, yep, yep.
But yeah, we'll wrap it up there. If you have any alibis you wanna spit out before we close the chapter on this part one of the Last of Us 2 spoiler video cast.
The only thing I can say is like, hey, guy, you guys can reach out to us in Twitter as well. Our Twitter handle is at the GM_X. And then we have our website, which we've already talked about, and then we also have a Facebook page on which is the Game Run X. So whenever you guys can, just drop in there, and if you want to send us a tweet or you want to send us a comment, you can definitely reach out to us in there.
Yeah, and I think that if everything works out all right, then we will be back next week, same time, with our impressions on the second half of The Last of Us 2. So with that, I'm Josh. This is Manny.
See you guys.
Take care. Keep gaming.